So everyone listening to me right now will die one day. And there's a lot of people who are working in biotechnology, some hucksters who might say they'll be able to save you with current technology. I'd like to spend a few minutes just talking about the biological basis for death, though. So we're all descendants of an ancient machine that existed 4 billion years ago, about 1 trillion generations behind us, Luca. That's a cellular replicator. And this is a replicator that stores its architecture in code encoded in DNA. And that code is copied at every replication by machines called DNA polymerases. They make an error every 100 million letters, and along with some other helper enzymes, that gets down to about 1 in 10 billion errors per replication, which is about a third of an error per replication of a human cell. That sounds great, but we have about 4 trillion nucleated cells in our body. And that leads to about hundreds to thousands of replications during a lifetime, which means you accrue hundreds to thousands of errors in your somatic cells. And this has been verified by sequencing. This is important because our bodies are basically a cellular death cult. All the cells in your body are committed to the somatic pact, the commitment that they will die in service of the immortal line. That is the germ line, the select few cells that propagate forward in time to create the next descendant. And everything, all cells are working together to make sure that happens. And so when you have that somatic pact being broken by these mutations that occur in replication, you get cell disease and you get cancer. And cancer is really just a traitorous event against the somatic pact. What starts as mutation leads to genomic instability and hypermutation, and eventually an evolutionary arms race between the traitors and the loyal soma, and it normally leads to death. The interesting thing about cancer is that it's not primarily a function of genes or environment, but largely random chance. If you look at what kinds of tissues develop cancer, they're the ones that have more cell replications in them. So it's simply a matter of rolling the dice every time you divide the cell. And so our bodies, now that we've cured a lot of diseases, are at the very limits of what our somatic pact can handle. So about 40% of the people in this room will develop cancer in their lifetime, and about half of those will die from it. And so this leads to the question, what is it that allows the line to be immortal? I mean, there's still mutations. Female egg cells accrue about 20 mutations per generation, and male sperm cells accrue 25 to 65, depending upon when you choose to sire your children. And there's sort of two answers. The first is recombination, and that is that really deleterious mutations tend to get diluted out in the population because we have recombination from each parent, and the really bad mutations get sort of just diluted out over time if they're really terrible. But there's a more fundamental one, and that's the clonal filter. The fact that every time you conceive an embryo, you're making an all or none bet on a single genotype, one copy of the code, and you're asking, is this one sufficient to be able to grow a body from scratch? Does it work or not? And so ultimately, in summary, death is a fundamental consequence of the biophysics of replication and the statistics of mutations in a large number of cells in a body. And there's really no easy cures. The only thing I can tell you practically is that you can starve yourself mildly, or you can self-castrate. You can surgically resect your gonads. And that's about the only thing you can do that has evidence behind it. But I'm going to indulge in a little bit of SF-style sci-fi. In the next few decades, we're going to start having the ability to recode the germline, to actually start making genetic alterations to our code. And we can start taking the best alleles from across the human diaspora that we know are protective against cancer and create a new design. And we don't have to stop with humans. We can take advantage of the fact that large animals actually, they develop cancer much less on a per cell division basis. So elephants have 100 times the number of cells and blue whales 1,000. We're beginning to understand what's happening with the elephants. They have extra tumor suppressor genes. And we could imagine making a hybrid species that takes the best tools from across the animal kingdom to create a really strong design that is resistant to noise. But if we want to make a species that is cotemporal with the stars and the planets, we have to do a little more. We have to take advantage of the fact that we have the ability to store information for eons by using solid-state storage and error correction codes. And we have to build a link between that digital world and the biological by building programmable polymerases that allow you to transduce digital information into the macromolecular code, such that you can avoid serial replications and create a body that relies on a master copy of code that stands beyond the noise, and that you can create one day, imaginably, a child that lives beyond the horizon of death. But everyone here is doomed, so you should definitely have a drink. You should have should have a nice stiff drink at the break and enjoy the rest of the evening.